But in their little group, their morale is high. They're talking to one another. They're talking about, how excited they are to go back to their homeland and join the Partisans and kick Nazi ass or whatever. But that doesn't last for long because, yes, after a few days being out in the open seas, their worst nightmares come true. Now, there's an interesting moment that they say, and it's not clear what exactly happened. Just like a day or so after they leave the convoy, an airplane flies very low over them, like kind of buzzes the ship, but they're not sure whether it's an Axis plane or an Allied plane. They conclude kind of that that's an Axis reconnaissance plane, although I don't know where it would have been coming from. So they're kind of in the middle of nowhere in the South Atlantic, but it is this weird moment that precedes the attack. So at night in rather rough seas, shortly after they had finished their supper, an alarm sounded on the ship, which made a rapid turn at full speed. It was, as they soon discovered, a torpedo that had been launched and narrowly missed them. So obviously tension is very high on the ship, but things start to calm down after a few hours. Like I said, the seas are rather rough, and so they conclude that the likelihood of being torpedoed is smaller now. It's not optimal time for torpedoing. And they know also that there's nothing they could do, especially, the 8 of them. Now there was there were armed soldiers, a group of British soldiers on board the ship that had machine guns on deck.
Okay.
But, the Yugoslavs, they were like, well, there's nothing we can really do. Let's just ride it out. We'll settle down for the night and see what happens. And which is a pretty horrible place to be, right?
Yeah.
And so I translated a little excerpt from the book that I think gives you kind of an idea of at least his style of writing a little bit and what went on when the attack finally went down. So, Fritz, why don't you read this little part?
I had just begun to settle down into my bed when suddenly I heard a horrible rumble. I jumped up from my bed and looked through the door and saw that the whole ship was illuminated and shaking from cannon and machine gun fire. It started, I said to myself, grabbing a life vest. It was an old rudimentary life vest made from 2 pieces of cork, sewn into sacks, fixed with a harness. When I got out of the cabin into the hallway that was only a half-meter across, a dead man lay next to me on the right-hand side. The machine gun fire was falling like rain, but I could hear Georgi running towards me crying. I grabbed his hand to calm him down, but he kept crying. At that moment, a shell hit the ship, shaking us violently, and I saw Georgi fall dead at my feet. God damn.
Fritz here. This has been a highly manipulative attempt to entrap you into our Patreon page at patreon.com/tenepod to subscribe and get the full premium episode we've teased here. Also check out our Twitter account, also at Tenepod, and follow us, subscribe, and get the latest updates as well as whatever garbage falls out of our brains. So we cool?